Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome back to this episode of Complaint Free Life. And your host, Asal Ormanova, here in a new place in Lviv. As you may have been following me, that I have been in Kiev lately, and because of the deterioration of situation security-wise, unfortunately, my partner and I had to leave. So we left yesterday, and we're here today. And I feel like a lot of the calmness in my nervous system is calming down, and so I'm still coming back to myself, but going through a lot of the situations that sound very unrealistic, very like things that I would never think of happening. And in the midst of that, I hear my humanitarians, when they transition, when they're thinking about transitioning, they have this argument of be realistic, and I wanted to address that. I think one of the maybe biggest reason, showstopper that we're having, the objections that we're having in our lives to go for the best case scenario is that sentence, be realistic. And I was also thinking how appropriate maybe it would be to talk about it, is considering that we are currently in the global world seem to be living in very unreal times. Like if, for instance, someone would tell me a year ago, so next year at this time you would be in a bomb shelter, trying still to work and create ideas at the same time, scared for your life, I would be like, come on, be realistic. And also, not only I would say that, but I would say probably for many reasons, I would say I can never imagine Ukraine experiencing such times, right? Even though I have worked in Ukraine for 5 years prior, I would never imagine that happening. So therefore, I would never think of that being realistic, right? And also, me after leaving the humanitarian world still being in that condition, I would never imagine either, because I would say, well, it's not realistic because I don't work for a humanitarian world anymore. So me being exposed to such conditions is unreal, right? So, and then still experiencing that, still surviving those explosions, still being in bomb shelter um, every couple of hours, and still trying to make sense of things, and dealing with fear and all the other emotions, and still working, and still being with people who are going through this. So you can see that there's so many unrealistic things happening, and it might be, of course, in my life and in the life of my friends who have um, connection to Ukraine or who live in Ukraine, who are Ukrainians. So I can imagine that, I can understand that this might be happening to some of the people. But when it comes to humanitarians, think about it, like we live in so many, for us, unrealistic worlds most of the time, right? We are exposed to that from early on in our careers. We live in places, in conditions that many people who are not exposed to it would think it's unreal. It's just unreal. I can't believe how or why this is happening, right? So if you can think about that, and then yet, when it comes to transitioning, I know it all will make sense now when I say this, is when it comes to transitioning, I also see that many of us fellow humanitarians telling me that, well, that's unrealistic to be going for that um, best scenario because I just don't see that happening. Right. So, and then they tell themselves, well, be realistic, it's not possible. So I'm just like so puzzled in so many ways as to most of our careers, most of our lives going through these unreal situations, unrealistic situations, maybe even if it's very negative, but still unreal situations, and also seeing so many humans going through this and still achieve unreal things and admiring them, and still for ourselves stopping that road to the best case scenario, transitioning to the best case scenario, saying that, well, that's not real. Do you know what I'm saying? So my dears, I want to I don't know, open your hearts, open your brains, and then just get my message through to say that why are we stopping ourselves? Why are we stopping ourselves to go to our best case scenarios simply because we're arguing to ourselves that it's not realistic? Right? So if anything in the world who should be talking about unreal things, it's us humanitarians, I find. If anyone who have, you know, who can advocate for human resilience, who can advocate for human courageousness, who can advocate for like going through the unreal things and still be amazing humans achieving amazing results in their lives. If anyone can in the world advocate for that, it's us humanitarians, because we have been exposed to all of that unreal situations. So we know that if those unreal situations exist in the world, that also means that we can achieve unreal results for ourselves. We can achieve those best case scenarios for ourselves if we wanted to. The reason why we're not doing it is because we're stopping ourselves by telling that it's unreal, or be realistic, and that is too high or too difficult or too not in my plate, or whatever it is that we're seeing. And the reason why we're saying that is because we are so past focused, and that's okay because our brains are made that way. Our brains have that default system inside that says we can only judge by what is realistic based on what we know from the past. We can't really do that from the future, meaning from what we don't yet know, because it's too difficult for our brains to foresee, even though our brains also has the capacity to foresee things, but it foresees things mostly on the basis of what we know so far, what we have experienced so far. Right? So that's why whatever we experience so far, then our projections will always be the next thing, always be the linear incremental growth. It will never be a jump, or it will never be something outside of what we can imagine because we think it's just too much or too unrealistic. So, because our brains are built that way, we often then project it saying that all of what we're really wanting, those best case scenarios, they can't really be happening. And therefore, we just tell ourselves, we advocate for our worst case scenario, or we advocate for our the next best thing scenario, and therefore we never even shoot for our best scenario. So, my dears, knowing the brain is like built like that, knowing what we know, knowing also our experiences of the past, of what else is possible in the world, even if the negative and the positive and all the things, then why not go for the best case scenario that we're thinking of? And notice that when we're saying be realistic, we're also not really talking about like becoming an astronaut from being a humanitarian, right? So that's not even what we're talking about. Maybe that could be labeled as be realistic, because probably for being an astronaut, you need to train from a small child and all the things. I don't know, I'm imagining. But when we're talking about our best case scenarios, we're talking simply about the ideal job that we want to have, or uh, the amount of money that we want to have, or the lifestyle that we want to have that allows us to do X, Y, Z. We're really talking about those, and even then, we're telling ourselves that we're unrealistic, or we're telling ourselves that be real or be realistic. Now, I find that it's high time that we question that statement. let's question that be realistic statement and find out what that actually is in your scenario. So whenever your brain is saying be realistic, ask yourself, what is it exactly that means? Right? Because I think oftentimes we make the mistake to believe that realistic means something like objectively true outside. But realistic really means subjective perception of our reality, of what's happening in our world. It's how we're perceiving our current life, our current way of living. This is what we think is real is happening, right? Whatever is that's happening already that we can see, we can hear, we can touch, all of that is for us a reality. And that's how we see our world now. And what's interesting is that also that is not constant. That keeps changing as well. We keep growing in that, whatever the quote's realistic, we keep growing and that keeps changing and reality keeps changing. But whenever we want to go and transition for something else, it seems like our brain is so good at just saying, no, be realistic. You can't really go for that. You can't really go to that growth or to that job because you don't have the qualification or you don't have experience. You need to be doing XYZ and you don't have that, and therefore don't even start, right? Now, the other thing I was thinking of is imagine a child when a child is dreaming and going for big things. Imagine us adults telling the child, well, be realistic, you can't really do that. Imagine, like, can you imagine telling the child that? I don't imagine that. I imagine always telling children, well, go for it. Whatever it is, go for it. If you want to shoot that high and be an astronaut, yes, please do be an astronaut or whoever, right? It doesn't matter. Now, then, when is it okay for us to be telling ourselves that it's not okay to be going for the stars, right? So when did we decide that, well, it's okay for children to dream and it's okay for children to go for the best case scenarios because their life is ahead of them or whatever the way we argue, but it's not really okay for us? But why? But why is it that way? Why did we decide at some point that for us now it's okay just to not go for the best case scenario because it's just too hard or too difficult or too not possible, and therefore we just settle for whatever we think the next best thing? When did we decide as adults that it's okay now for us to do that? Because the irony that I want to point out here is that now actually is the time for us to say, let's go for another unrealistic thing since we've experienced it so much, since we have so much experience to see what are the so many wildest different things possible in the world. Let's go for that. Right? So why are we not doing that? Why are we not saying that we have so much experience now that we could be going for so many unrealistic dreams? And I want to point out that, like, why are we not doing that? And the other thing that I was thinking in this example is that, so when I was, the reverse example, so when I was a child, if someone told me, um, you will be experiencing going to over 50 countries, living in over 10 countries, and one day is experiencing so many different things, the great things and the bad things. And you will be at some point even deciding to be self-employed and not really working for someone and having all the freedom to be doing whatever you want to. If someone told me when I was in the village in Kyrgyzstan studying in school, if someone told me that's my future, this is how it's going to look like, I would probably tell that person, be real. Do you see what I'm saying? I would probably tell that person, I don't think that's me because I don't know how that's going to happen. Because here I am studying in school, my father telling me that I should marry the person he found in the village, and him telling me that there's no way we can fund your studies and all of the things. I just don't see that happening. You see, so for me, in that moment, that would be unrealistic. Yet, because of the thanks to the childhood fantasy, thanks to so many ways to try out in life, all of that is now my reality. All of that is something that I have experienced, and now I'm experiencing it, right? And as I was growing up, again, there would be many occasions probably where I could say, well, it's unrealistic to go for it. It's unrealistic go for studying in Germany. Yet it was possible. I could also say it's unrealistic to work for such an organization without having an education in, I don't know, Harvard or whatever else that people think of it. But it's so possible, and I did it. And also, I could say it's unrealistic to be working as self-employed and doing all the things that you love and having that financial freedom, time freedom to be doing whatever else you want to, and traveling and living in places with your loved ones, because it's so unrealistic, I could say. But I'm going for it and I'm living that. So, all of this just to say, my dears, is that be realistic is just a fear telling you of the past. So, the fear is telling you that it's fearful of the future that you're wanting. And also, that fear is coming basically from the past, because our brain just automatically has that ability to tell us that whatever the future we're thinking is not realistic, probably because, especially if we haven't experienced it in the past, right? So everything that we will be projecting into the future is probably going to be based on the past. And if we're projecting something, or sorry, if we're thinking of a future that is not, that hasn't happened in the past, it means that our brain will be immediately fearful and say it's not possible. And then because it's fearful that it's not possible, it believes that it's not possible, then we just start telling ourselves all the stories of going for it would be a waste of time. Why bother committing to it if we won't get it anyway? So therefore, we just advocate for not going for whatever the best scenario that we're wanting, and therefore we settle for something else. And that's where other problems start, is when we start then saying, well, we could really go for what we wanted, but we didn't because we are fearful. So now we're here. And what's the point? We could as well go back and do our own job. It's not much of a change and all of the things. And then we start continuing struggling within us about all of the dilemmas, all of the struggles that we have, and then we continue feeling not fulfilled. We continue feeling like we could have done a better job, but we didn't, and all of this then lead to probably going back to what we know. And that's exactly what I'm trying to warn you not to do. And whenever the be realistic sentence comes up in your mind, question it, and also understand that this is all fear-based judgment, and we should never be making our future or creating our future based on that fear. And even if the fear is there, we should still go for what we're really wanting. And if there is a desire, like I keep repeating that, if there is a desire within us that that's what we want, it means we're capable, um, we have that capacity to do that. It's just that we need to allow us to go for it. We need to permit ourselves to go for it. And therefore, the best way to do that, keep going for that best case scenario, even if the fear is there. Because in the end, even if you didn't get whatever you wanted, you have grown so much that you are likely to create another great scenario. Because otherwise, the alternative is staying or incrementally growing a little bit and not really being fully satisfied, and then continue that struggle of trying to fix things, which is not really worth it, in my opinion. So that's why if we're going to struggle and fix something, let's go for at least creating that best case scenario. Let's go at least for creating that unrealistic scenario, whatever our brain is saying unrealistic, and then let's go for that. At least we will have trusted ourselves. We all have allowed ourselves to dream bigger and to go for that and grow in the process of achieving that, and having the likelihood of achieving something amazingly equal, if not the same, then keep being in that place that we don't really want to be, and then keep struggling in that place. So, my dears, if you're having struggle with this be realistic statement of your mind, then let's get coaching. Let's get you coached on this topic, on this self-limiting belief, so that you can actually go for achieving whatever the best case scenario of your transition that you're hoping and wanting. And let's go for that, so that you can finally start believing yourself and your dreams and saying, yeah, I can definitely do that, even if with fear and with all the doubts. I'm still going for it because that's worth it. Okay, my dears, have an amazing weekend.